Othello. Othello is a tragedy about love, the love of a man for a woman, both of whom are manipulated by an almost tangible evil force until the one destroys the other because his love cannot tolerate unfaithfulness. But Othello is more than a sad, simple love story. It is a profound exploration of the evil inherent in men's souls, the nature and vulnerability of love, the good and evil potential in sexual love, the problem of the outsider and prejudice, the relationship between appearance and reality, and finally, how a noble man destroys the woman he loves and what is honorable and good in himself because he is brought to a frightening pitch of anger, jealousy, and confusion by his own lack of perception and balance, and by the Machiavellian intrigues of his supposed friend, Iago. The initial setting of Othello is in Venice, a city in Italy. The first scene occurs in the middle of the night between Rodrigo and Iago about the marriage of Desdemona, a beautiful young noble of Venice, to Othello Gr. In the setting, one can clearly see accusations by Rodrigo, disappointment. There's the jealousy of Rodrigo towards Othello for winning Desdemona, jealousy of Iago towards Cassio for getting the promotion, hatred towards Othello from both of them. Rodrigo that he lost Desdemona, Iago that he lost the job, the promotion as lieutenant to Othello. There's deception, lies, secrecy, anger, vindictiveness, betrayal. And towards the end, acceptance by Rodrigo, collusion between Rodrigo and Iago together, and the cementing of an alliance between Rodrigo and Iago, which was initially to win Desdemona, but is now aimed against Othello. The word Moor is a Muslim person of Arab descent from North Africa. Initially in Greek meant very dark or very black. Othello is a general in Venice as a highly skilled and valuable soldier. He is engaged by the Italian government, the Senate, to lead them into war against the Turks for a colony that they are both fighting over. This colony is called Cyprus. It's an island. Othello is liked and respected by the soldiers, but not really accepted because of his otherness. Othello is essentially a love story that ends in a tragedy. Some of the themes include sexual love as a good and an evil force, passion, pride, love, confusion, prejudice, racism, lies, revenge, for real and perceived events. For example, Iago wants revenge against Cassio and also against Othello because he thinks they've both had been in a sexual relationship with Emilia. Now, he doesn't know if it's true, but he's going to work on the assumption that it's true, and he wants revenge on both of them. Unfaithfulness, and again, sometimes unsubstantiated or unproved faithfulness or unfaithfulness, and then acting on something that hasn't been proved or you don't have the evidence for. There's the theme of appearance and reality. a common theme in most of Shakespeare's plays. There's secrecy, which you saw right from the beginning when Rodrigo and Iago meet. Um, Rodrigo hiding in the shadows and speaking about Othello to Brabantio. Another theme is idealized love. In idealized love, you're worshipping the person and you're worshipping sometimes the concept of love. So to Othello, Desdemona is like an angel. His love for her is like being in heaven. It's very, very high. He's put her very high on a pedestal. Worships her faithfulness, her love for him. And obviously, if he thinks that she's being unfaithful, because he's invested so much in this relationship, it is obviously going to end badly, especially if he cannot clearly work out what's happening. And there's also anger, naive trust. It is important for us as people living in a community, in a society, that we trust one another. We cannot go around having a normal, inverted commas, life if we're distrustful of every person that we meet. However, we also see here the power and the tragic consequences of naive trust, like Rodrigo, naively and for a long time trusting Iago, regardless of the outcomes not being that which is promised. He still continues to trust Iago. We can't entirely blame Rodrigo because Othello trusts him, Cassio trusts him, Desdemona trusts him, even his wife Amelia trusts him, the leaders in Cyprus trust him. He has managed to put up such a brilliant front that nobody suspects his inner motives. The one person who does have a little bit of an insight into this is Rodrigo, because he tells Rodrigo what he's going to do. He tells Rodrigo who he is. But Rodrigo so naively trusts him that even when when Iago is actually telling the truth, he doesn't believe him. Jealousy, the green-eyed monster, is definitely a leading theme in Othello. Initially with Othello, we'll see his pride as being one of his tragic flaws, and then later the jealousy, leading to the confusion, eventually the murder of Desdemona. Misogyny is the hatred of women. Iago is very much a misogynist. He has negative things to say about Desdemona, he has negative things to say about Emilia, and pretty much women in general. He believes that all women will be unfaithful. It's just a matter of time. He's a malcontent. He's unhappy about life in general, and now more specifically unhappy with Iago and Cassio. Hypocrisy, relating to appearance and reality, where you are or believe one thing but say or do another. And then, of course, the theme of honesty, as honest Iago is one of the leading characters in the play. The relationship between Rodrigo and Iago. They're both from Venice. Rodrigo is a nobleman. Iago is a soldier, not as educated and certainly not as wealthy as Rodrigo. So to him, Rodrigo is his purse, the person who gives him the money. Rodrigo trusts Iago, so he's very angry. The play begins with him talking to Iago, really angry and jealous that Desdemona has chosen Othello over him. After paying Iago huge sums of money, to persuade Desdemona to marry Rodrigo. He says he thought Rodrigo was his friend and now he feels betrayed. Iago, the master manipulator, articulate, conversationalist, a person who can move the conversation, move the argument so that he gets you to believe what he wants you to believe, calms Rodrigo down and eventually gets him to believe Iago. Iago thinks Rodrigo is a fool, an easy mark from whom he can continue making money from something that is becoming or has become Rodrigo's weakness, his love for Desdemona. Iago doesn't feel bad about this. He's quite willing to take advantage of others so he can get what he wants. And right now, that person is Rodrigo. Iago and Cassio. Iago is really upset that Cassio has gotten a promotion as lieutenant, a promotion that he himself really wanted. Iago is generally a malcontent, someone who is unhappy with life, who focuses on the negative, who's quite pessimistic in his outlook on life. He sees the negative things, he looks at people, and even when they do good things or they're experiencing good things, he can see the negative in it and he's just waiting for the negative to happen. Sometimes he'll deliberately orchestrate something negative to happen. Like later on in the play, when you would see that after using Rodrigo, he's willing to kill Rodrigo or have Rodrigo killed, or that he would use Othello's love for Desdemona to get his own revenge. He's jealous of Cassio, who got the promotion, and he feels that he deserved that promotion. So there's definitely a sense of entitlement. Whether he's right or not, we don't know. He feels he should have gotten it because he's older. He's more experienced of war. He is a Venetian in Venice, and also that many people have chosen him, but Othello, who had the final say, chose Cassio. Iago does not like Cassio because Cassio is a Florentine, from Florence, another city in Italy. A person who Iago thinks is a strategist, a pen pusher, a mathematician, rather than a hands-on soldier, someone who's got experience in the field. Cassio is very handsome, he's well liked, especially by the ladies, because of his charm and what Iago calls his daily beauties. He's almost the opposite of Iago in terms of personality. Iago and Truth. Most people would generally agree that Iago is a villain, that he's a malcontent, he's angry, he's bitter, he's unhappy. He is a pessimist who sees the negative. However, there are some times, like this incident, where he does tell Rodrigo the truth. He tells him that he hates Othello and that I follow him to serve my turn upon him. I'm using Othello to get what I want. He also tells Rodrigo quite clearly, I am not what I am, which is actually a flipping of the verse from Exodus 3:14 in the Bible, where God says, I am that I am, meaning who I say I am. That is the truth. But Rodrigo ignores these truths that Iago is sharing because he's in love with Desdemona. So he's not clearly focused. He's gullible. He wants to believe what he wants to believe because he wants Desdemona. He's a nobleman from Venice, and perhaps he thinks he deserves Desdemona, although she has shown no interest in him, and her father has refused that Rodrigo marry her. He's relying on Iago, and he does not think that Iago will use him like he is using Othello. So even when Iago confesses, Rodrigo chooses not to believe. Iago is highly intelligent. He's an egotist, very self-centered. He's the biggest person in his own life, and he thinks really lowly of others. He's proud. He denounces conventional standards of morality. So generally people think, we should help one another, we should tell the truth, we should do the, in inverted commas, the right thing. Iago doesn't believe that. And even at the very end, after Desdemona is killed and Othello kills himself, he's still unrepentant. There is no change in him. Clearly we can see he loves evil for evil's sake. Again, while we clearly recognize the evil inherent in Iago, clearly the villain, right from the beginning, lying to Rodrigo, jealous of Cassio, wanting to get revenge on Othello, all that is clear. It's out there. The tragedy is the tragedy of Othello. So there's a couple of concepts and ideas you need to understand about tragedy. The first one is a tragic flaw. So a flaw is less than perfect. It can be an error. It can be something that detracts, that reduces or lessens the perfection of something. So sometimes you'd have a beautiful diamond, but there's a flaw in the diamond. There's perhaps a crack or a chip or something that makes it less than complete, less than perfect. So the tragic flaw is a defect in the protagonist that brings about his or her downfall. A tragic flaw. The hero, in this case Othello, is eventually ruined by one or more of the forces and his response to these forces. So two of the really big dominant flaws in Othello would one be his pride, which you see initially, although it doesn't immediately present as pride. Iago, because he's so smart, recognizes it as a more latent. It's there in Othello, but perhaps not many people see it. But Iago has seen it, and it's something that he will use against Othello. The hero is admirable but flawed, like Othello, noble, kind, good, high moral values, but he has a weakness, like we said, pride and later jealousy. He has the potential for good and evil, like all of us, and he has the free will to choose the path that he will take. When Othello realizes or thinks that Desdemona is unfaithful, he still has a choice, and he makes a choice. Hubris means excessive pride. It is important for us to be proud of who we are and what we've achieved, proud of our families, but excessive pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. And that is one of the weaknesses that Iago will use. He'll bring it out, he will use it, and eventually it will be to Othello's destruction. The tragic flaw, pride. When Iago returns to Othello, after going with Rodrigo to Brabantio's house to tell him that Desdemona has eloped with Othello, there's some noise, and he tells Othello to go inside because Brabantio is coming to arrest him. But Othello is very calm, cool, composed, confident, is unafraid of Brabantio, who's a very high government official in Venice. He says he's helped Venice and he's well regarded by the Senate. He also is of noble birth and high standing, and he can care for Desdemona in the manner to which she is accustomed. He loves Desdemona. He feels he's married her respectably because they both want to be married and they both love each other. And he's quite willing to explain this to Brabantio and to anyone else. He's not afraid. However, he also says in lines 29 to 31 that he won't go inside. Not I. I must be found. My parts, my title, and my perfect soul shall manifest me rightly. Go back to that concept of hubris, excessive pride. And Iago recognizes in Othello a man loving his own pride and purposes. Pride is the tragic flaw that Iago will use against Othello to bring about his downfall. However, neither Othello's pride nor Iago's manipulations are only responsible for the tragedy. It's Othello, as well as other events, people, circumstances, fate, and choice that wittingly or unwittingly contribute to Othello's downfall. Brabantio is Desdemona's father and also a high-ranking senator. We know this because he's called for when the government decides to go to war against Turkey over Cyprus. He's awoken by Rodrigo and Iago, who tell him that his innocent young daughter has run away with Othello. They shout, "Thieves, thieves, thieves," as if Othello has stolen Desdemona. Brabantio is horrified by the language they use, mostly that Iago uses, to describe her and Othello together sexually, like animals. We call this bestiality. He calls Othello, there's the contrast. An old black ram is tapping your white ewe. Another sexual image. They are making the beast with 2 backs. And he says to Brabantio again, picking up the animal imagery, that Othello is like an animal, that you'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. He also says the devil will make your grandchildren like animals, implying Othello is like an animal and also aligned to the devil because he's black. Although at first Brabantio doesn't believe them because they're shouting and it's in the middle of the night, when he can't find Desdemona, he realizes it might be true. And although he's previously said no to Rodrigo marrying Desdemona, he now joins up with Rodrigo to start a search to find Desdemona. Rodrigo and Brabantio struggle to believe how a woman like Desdemona who Brabantio says was never bold of spirit, was still and quiet, gentle, obedient, sheltered, naive, beautiful, brought up in civilized society like Venice, with the sophistication of art, music, painting, speech, dancing, money, and status, could love a barbarian like Othello without black magic. There's clear racism with Rodrigo calling Othello thick lips and Brabantio calling him sooty bosom, such a thing as thou, and abuser of the world, an evildoer. Brabantio says Desdemona, with her upbringing and nature, would fear Othello, not be attracted to him. He therefore calls Othello a foul thief, saying he stole Desdemona. When Desdemona chooses Othello over him, he issues a rather profound warning that Iago will later remind Othello of. He says to Othello, Brabantio says to Othello, look to her, Moor, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father, and may thee. How Othello and Desdemona met. So Brabantio, who is a member of the Senate, would have met Othello, who is a general in the Venetian army, and Brabantio would invite him home, and Othello would tell these stories about his life. And because it was in Brabantio's home, Desdemona would also listen to these stories. And she told Othello that if he had a friend that loved her, he should teach this friend how to tell his story, and that would attract her, that would woo her. Othello, encouraged by her saying this, then told her of his feelings for her. She loved him for the dangers he had endured and what he had suffered. His life, he had a difficult life. And he loved her, but she loved him for what he had been through in life and in war. Desdemona is an interesting character. There's no mention of her mother, and so one would assume she's grown up with her father, Brabantio. She's obviously lived a life of luxury. She is one of the nobles in Venice. But her father has absolutely no idea of her feelings for Othello, and no idea that she's actually left the house in the middle of the night to marry Othello secretly. One would assume that Brabantio would not have let her marry Othello if she had asked for his permission. But she does demonstrate courage and independence in marrying Othello, who is so very different from her on so many levels and in different ways. However, she says she's not impressed by his achievements. She was not impressed by Othello's achievements and his victories, but rather by his suffering and how he has overcome this. Later she tells the Senate she is not interested in upholding Venetian social values. So most people in Venice would have looked down on her, and really struggled to understand or accept why she chose Othello. But she says she's in love with Othello the man. His color is unimportant. I saw Othello's visage in his mind. She was attracted to his mind. She sees the goodness in Othello and in his noble features and his noble soul. She recognizes he is the same on the inside and the outside. Color is not important. Othello is a soldier, is also a man of nobility, honesty, integrity when we first meet him, and he lives by a code of honor. What he says what he does is who he is. There is no battle between appearance and reality. There's no facade. The man you see is who he is. He's decisive, he's a man of action. He has to be. He's in dangerous situations, life and death situations where decisions and actions need to be taken quickly and decisively. When he loves Desdemona, he loves her completely. Neither of them have been in love before. This love that he has for her is complete, something that he's willing to let his life stand on or fall by. He tells the Senate, if Desdemona does not support his story, they can take her away and kill him. He says, let your sentence even fall upon my life. And later he says, my life upon her faith. He is willing to bet his whole life on her faithfulness. He is so trusting, so invested, so totally believing in her faithfulness. And one has to ask, what would happen to this love, to this idealized love, when he suspects that she is unfaithful? When Rodrigo hears that Desdemona is leaving with Othello to Cyprus, immediately he's quite devastated. His chance with Desdemona has now been lost. He says he wants to die because he loves her and he can't have her, even though she's married. Iago does not believe in love between man and women, and he definitely doesn't believe in love between God and people. So he gives Rodrigo some advice about how to control his feelings. He says to Rodrigo, our bodies are our gardens, to which our worlds are gardeners. We are in control. And he also says people must balance their feelings with reason. If the balance of our lives had not one scale of reason to poise another of sensuality, the blood and baseness of our natures would lead to terrible consequences. Iago's advice to Rodrigo, while it has some merit, is not for Rodrigo's benefit. Rather, it is to stabilize the uncontrollable Rodrigo and to further use him. To Iago, man is in control, and Iago is very much in control of himself, his feelings, and has no qualms to control other people too. The practical, logical Iago tells Rodrigo to join the army and also come to Cyprus. Now, prior to this, Rodrigo was not in the army. He's a nobleman and lives in Venice, wealthy, educated. There's no reason for him to really join the army. But remember that Othello will be in charge of one ship, Cassio will be in charge of another, and Iago will be leading Venice on the third ship. So for Rodrigo to get on that ship and join the army means he will be close to Iago, who will help him. Iago tells Rodrigo that Desdemona will get tired of Othello and will look for another man. And this will be Rodrigo's chance. He's quite pessimistic about the marriage. He says that this marriage between a barbarian and a super subtle Venetian is going to be easy for him and the tribe of Hell to destroy. So he's obviously quite clear about where his allegiance is. In earlier he had said, I am not what I am, and he said it was an inversion or a perversion of Exodus 3:14, with God saying, I am that I am. Here is clearly with the devil. He says the tribe of hell will help him, Iago, to destroy the marriage between Othello and Desdemona. And then I hate the Moor. So for him, it's just a matter of time when Desdemona and Othello are going to break up. And he says when Desdemona does sleep with Rodrigo, it will be pleasure for Rodrigo and sport for Iago. Something that he can laugh at, something he can enjoy somebody else's misery. So, again, ever practical, always with his eye to his best advantage. He tells Rodrigo, put money in thy purse, about 10 times in from lines 327 to 354. Put money in thy purse and come on board with me to Cyprus and you'll get Desdemona. And Rodrigo decides he'll go even further than that. I'll go sell all my land. So while we recognize who Iago is, we cannot also ignore Rodrigo's part in his own folly and what happens to him. A soliloquy is a lengthy speech that an actor would use on stage. It's a conversation with oneself where you say what you're thinking, and it's also for the audience to know what you're thinking. So Iago's first soliloquy in Act 1, Scene 3, lines 362 to 383. It tells us, the audience, that Rodrigo is a fool, a snipe, and his purse, his source of money, and that he's using Rodrigo for sport and profit. Just prior to this, in the conversation with Rodrigo, he said that he's going to create problems for Desdemona and Othello, where she cheats on Othello, and that would be sport and profit. He says, I hate the Moor. He thinks maybe Othello has slept with Amelia. He's not sure if it's true, but he's going to assume it's true. So again, you can see the malcontent, the pessimist, somebody who wants to see bad things happen because they're generally thinking bad things are happening anyway. He says that Othello has a high opinion of him, so he'll use this against Othello. And Cassio is a proper man, handsome, well-liked, complete. Iago does not like him, obviously. He's jealous of Cassio because of Cassio getting the promotion, and he hates the Moor. So he wants revenge on them both. He will over time, so he's not in a hurry. This is not something that's just done out of passion. He's going to take his time. He's going to work on this. And he's going to bide his time, wait for his chances. And he's going to make Othello believe that Desdemona is cheating with Cassio. And since Cassio is handsome, he's got the personality, the nature, the reputation to seduce women, and he's close to Desdemona, it's going to be easy for Othello to believe this. Iago has clearly stated that he hates the Moor. He wants revenge on both Cassio and Othello, and he's quite close to Othello. They're both in the army together, and while Cassio is lieutenant, second in command, Iago is also close to him. He's third in command, and he's the person that Othello calls honest Iago, and he actually will leave Desdemona in Iago and Amelia's care and meet them in Cyprus. So Iago's plan. He says that the Moor, Othello, is of a free and open nature, that thinks men honest, that but seem to be so, and will tenderly be led by the noses as asses are. It's going to be very easy to mislead Othello because he just believes what you tell him. His plan is engendered, he's conceived a plan, he's created a plan, made a plan. Remember, at this stage, it is that, a plan. Again, we see in the lines, hell and night must bring this monstrous birth to the world's light, and aligning with hell, with the forces of evil, although he'll say that Othello is aligned to the devil because he's black, because he's a Moor and an outsider. But here you can see a deliberate choice to align with hell. Like Lady Macbeth, when she calls on the evil spirits to unsex her, it's not something that just happened. It's a choice. They're making a choice to align with evil and hell. Clearly, we can see in Act 1 that Iago hates goodness. He aligns himself with hell. His plan unfolds in stages, meaning he doesn't have the entire plan. This plan is going to evolve. People, situations, circumstances, events are going to help him in his plan, and he's quite flexible and intelligent and manipulative and ready to take advantage of things and people that will actually accelerate and escalate his plan. It's to bring it to light, to bring it to completion, to fruition. But at this stage, it's just a plan. At this point, his revenge is first for Cassio. And after Cassio, then Othello will be more easily caught. Why is the play set in two places? Namely Venice, where it starts off with, and then most of the play takes place in Cyprus. Venice symbolizes order, reason, the civilized, in inverted commas, world. Cyprus is an island, very hot. People are tense, on edge, expectation of war, and there's disorder and more the rule of passion as opposed to reason. The journey that Othello goes on, they leave Venice in 3 ships to Cyprus. That physical journey is also symbolic of the physical, mental, emotional, psychological journeys of the heart and mind from Venice to Cyprus. Storms, again, are symbolic, not just the storm that Iago, Othello, and Cassio undergo, but the actual storms of life. Storms from within and storms from outside, circumstances and events that create storms. When they leave Venice, they're leaving for war. Their expectation is a battle with the Turks. But when they land on Cyprus, the ships have sunk. There is no war. And the real battle begins. It becomes a battle for the mind, for the soul, for life, for power, for love, justice, and truth. It becomes a battle for marriage. and for love. The war, again symbolic, the battle war against the Turks becomes Iago's war, a psychological war against Othello's nobility and love for Desdemona because he wants to use the good in Othello to destroy him.